Welcome back to Pixel Perfect Podcast, everybody. I said it for real this time, and I'm not going to argue that I said something I didn't say later on. I'm Paige,
I am Erin.
and we are very excited to kick off January with some zombie-themed content.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Zombies all January long, just for you.
just because
For no
January's
reason.
a zombie month anyways. Like, everyone's so tired from everything that happened in 2020. No one wants to think or have feelings. We're just shuffling our way through the start of the year.
That seems like a good justification for us doing a zombie theme, even
I
though we
think so.
didn't have a justification before.
I'm just
Though, to
making
be
shit up.
fair, I feel like if you don't want to have feelings, probably reading World War Z, which is what we're talking about today, is not your best bet.
Oh yeah. And especially, like, if you're trying to, like, live in a little hidey hole and not think about COVID-19 or how it's impacting the world, do not read this
Do
book.
not read this book.
Holy shit.
So, World War Z is by Max Brooks, and it is basically like a fictional case study of what would happen if zombies actually did take over the world.
Mhm.
Like, if the dead actually started rising, how would humans react? How would the world react? How would the world interact?
Yep.
Like, it's basically one whole fictional. It's written. It's based on the premise. The premise is basically this guy did a report for the UN, so he went on interviewing everybody, and then they cut a bunch of his interviews. So he was like, "Fuck you! I'm gonna publish a book." So he published a book basically full of all the interviews that he did about the plague, as they call it,
Right. And it's
the
about,
zombie
was it
plague.
10 years since, like, the war ended, as they call it, like when they, like, started taking the world back?
I'm pretty sure it's been 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's been barely a decade since the last world power celebrated its deliverance on Victory in China Day.
Yeah.
So that's World War Z.
Yep.
It's an older book. Now I have to.
It's
I should have
2006, I think, or 2007.
2006.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Newer than I expected it to be, though. I don't know why. I thought this was going to be like a 90s book.
It reads like a 90s book, I
It
feel
kind
like.
of does. And like you
Yeah.
said, it was definitely, I don't want to say dense, maybe like robust, because it's like, it's only 350 pages, but like I didn't actually finish it. I read a lot from like each section to make sure I got like the overall theme of what was
Yeah.
going on in each,
That was
because
going to be my first question for you, is did you actually
I
finish
didn't
it?
finish it. I definitely, like, I read like several of each person's interviews in each chapter so I could like
Okay.
see how everything was progressing, because there was a
I
lot.
did finish it.
Well, you've read it before, haven't you?
Yes, but I did finish it for this. So, I've
Well,
done both things.
you're better than me then.
So, I am ultra prepared, which it always works out that way. One of us is like super prepared and the other one is only kind of prepared, and then the other one just takes the baggage.
Just figure it out, you know?
It's
Yeah.
just it works out.
Yeah.
This is why we're a partnership.
Oh my gosh. I was gonna, my first question outright is because I saw it was listed as like one of the best horror books, and I'm like, I get that there's like a lot of emotional impact in it. I didn't really find it scary though.
I don't think they mean horror in scary sense.
Okay.
I think they mean horror as in, I mean, it's zombies. It is a plague overtaking the world. I think it still falls in the horror genre.
Mm-hmm.
But you can have horror without having, like, Cabin in the Woods is horror, but also
Oh yeah,
not scary.
that's true.
So I feel like unlike say Happy Death Day, which is distinctly horror comedy,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like this distinctly falls within horror.
Okay, I think that makes sense.
And I was wondering because we were texting and I said I'm really excited for this episode, and you said I definitely have thoughts, which is usually code for us for I didn't like it.
I felt really bad too, and I said that not because I didn't like it, but because I had so many thoughts about how applicable it is to what's going on today. And
Okay.
I knew if I jumped into any of that whatsoever while we were texting, it would open up a can of worms. So I was like,
Okay.
I can't touch on
Okay.
anything.
Okay. So did you? I mean, it's weird for me because it's one of the more intellectual fictional books. I feel like.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I feel like enjoying it is a weird
Yeah.
like is a weird word to use, especially during COVID times, to be like, "Did you enjoy this book?" But it's just I guess, did you was it worthwhile read for you, I guess might be a better
I
question.
think so, yeah. I wouldn't say I would, like, was in love with it or, like, super enjoying it, but I found it really interesting. His writing is beautiful, like, he did a really good job. He's a very good writer. Also, fun fact, he's the son of Mel Brooks.
Oh, that
Isn't
was
that crazy?
did not yeah, would not have seen that coming.
Yeah, right? I was like, "That is insane." But yeah, so it was a quality book that I feel like is worth reading. I'm almost kinda surprised it's not, like, a school type literature, like, I feel like it seems like the kinda book I would read in school.
It feels very intellectual as you're going through it,
Yeah, definitely.
'cause it feels I think it's one of the most clever books ever written.
Yeah,
I think it's just clever.
yeah, I can agree with that. It pulls off a lot of things. Like it takes a very unique framing device to tell its story and then but like very succinctly gives you a bunch of perspectives on like people who were in the military, people who were like in like shady versions of military in other countries or people who are medical professionals or the people who are just like just living their own lives. Side note, the part with the kid who called himself an otaku really threw me for a loop because otaku in like today is so different from what he was calling it in
I
2006.
don't know the word.
In the book he calls it like an outsider, but
Yes.
a lot of
Yeah, I know that.
yeah, a lot of the times people call they'll say like they'll call themselves otakus. Particularly I feel like white people do this a lot because they're just like super into Japanese culture.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That is okay.
So I
Alright.
just kept laughing when I was reading that part.
Um, I think that the thing it does really, really well is creating scenarios that you would never think of, but make total sense.
Mhm.
Like, I think, like, one of the one more interesting ones to me is the one where the rich people hole up in, like, a fortified defensive house and then, like, stream it to the rest of the world, and then everybody storms it and is like, "We're taking this now."
It's very
Like, it's
purgy.
like I wouldn't think of it, but I'm like, "Yeah, that would happen."
Oh, absolutely. That would for sure happen. I
I
think
feel like that happens to you a lot as you read this book.
yeah, I feel like especially in terms of like America's response to everything, like we're gonna like the Yonkers failed battle, and we're like we're just gonna aggressively show up with military power because that's what fucking Americans do.
Yeah, and it talks about, like, the one detail I really liked, I don't know if you would have missed this, but the idea that there was more, crazy, like, last man on earth people who would, like, hold up in, like, their own homes and, like, fortified everything and, like, basically created, like, their own safe zone by
Hmm.
themselves, and it America had more of those than any other country because of their
Yeah,
individualism and ability to own guns,
yeah, that makes so much sense.
and I'm like, "America."
Yep, absolutely. What really shook me was like it's been discussed as being like a criticism of like what happened with the SARS outbreak in China in the early 2000s and like how they covered that up and like didn't want people to know about it. And I'm like, oh my god, that happened again this past year.
It's very interesting to read this with COVID in which is it's actually it's a rough read right now. If you're struggling with COVID, do not read
Yeah.
this book.
Yep.
Because it's something that I'd forgotten to kind of factor in. Oh, also, there is so much suicide in this book.
Oh, a lot.
If you struggle with suicide, do not read this book. There is like I mean, like, it makes sense within the
Hmm.
context of what he's writing. Like, all the situation he write where people commit suicide, I'm like, yeah, that seems realistic.
Yep.
But like, if you have issues with suicide, like, do not read this book.
Yeah, it's definitely a very present theme.
Um, but yeah, like the whole reaction of like America is so individualistic and like doesn't handle it well and like hides things from the American people so they're not totally
Yep.
informed and there's a bunch of lies out there and you're kind of just sitting there like, "Oh my god, it's COVID."
You're like, this is happening.
So, I feel like reading it with COVID in mind, it becomes even more brilliant if depressing.
Yeah, it's like I mean, it's very eye-opening. Like I feel like if I don't know, somehow you're still not taking everything in this pandemic seriously. Like, you should pick it up and have a little bit of a wake up call. There was this line that I picked out like towards the end that like really threw me for a loop, and it was one of the interviews. A girl was talking about a man she spoke to who said Americans are the only people he's ever met who just can't accept that bad things can happen to good people. And I was like, that so accurately sums up how I feel people are acting about COVID. The people who are like, I'm not going to act afraid of this. And it's like, I think you're just so afraid to even accept something terrible could happen to you that you have to deny that it's even happening.
Legitimately shocked when something does happen.
Yeah.
They're like, "How did I get COVID? I was only going to restaurants," and I'm like, Okay."
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, I feel like it's a little. I feel like this book includes a lot of different viewpoints from a lot of different countries, right? So you have
Mhm.
like South Africa, and you have Chile, and you have Cuba, and you have like Greenland, and you have like all of these different places that are involved. But at the same time, I feel like it's very an American centric book,
It is for sure.
and
Yeah.
Americans are definitely the heroes after they stop being so terrible.
Yeah.
Because they're the ones who are like, we got to fight back the zombie horde, like reclaim our human spirit. We have to like fight back, and the American president is like one of the greatest people to ever exist.
Yep.
So it's definitely an America-centric book, but it does do better than I think most American media of trying to incorporate different viewpoints and cultures and
Yeah.
experiences.
Right. Like, it definitely like they came out on top as like the heroes, but like there wasn't a shortage of criticisms of how poorly America also handled it to begin with. I wish I had done a little more research on this, but I'm curious to know if he like actually consulted with other cultures when writing like the interviews from those perspectives.
I mean, I'm assuming he did.
Yeah, I have no
Just
idea.
because, or at least to the extent, I mean, it's hard, right? Because we're two white people from America, so it's
Yeah,
like,
exactly. It's like I
um,
don't want to speak to how well he wrote from those other perspectives because I don't know. Like, I'm not part of those cultures. Like, I'm
uh,
sure he did I'm curious if he did research beyond like reading things and actually like spoke to people.
I mean, he goes into mannerisms that I really really hope so,
Hmm.
because like the different ways people talk and the different ways that the different languages that they use and things that they're explaining, I'm hoping that he did
Yeah,
his stuff.
yeah, for sure. I feel like
Um,
since it came out in 2006, you can it was a time you could get away with not doing that a little easier.
all right, sorry, I'm like going through and seeing. Doo, doo, doo. Brooke conducted copious research writing World War Z, are based on a variety of reference books in consultation with expert sources.
Okay.
So let me see.
I mean, simple
Yeah,
cursory Google searches I did, I didn't like bring up any like major criticisms on it or anything. Like, he totally fucked up this perspective or anything like that.
yeah. So this comes from um a interview with the Washington Post. He said everything in World War Z is based on reality except for the zombies.
Hmm.
But seriously, everything in the book is either taken from reality or 100% real. The technology, politics, economics, culture, military tactics. It was a lot of homework.
Wow. Damn.
So, um, I should have stock options on Amazon for the amount of reference books I bought from them. I'm also very lucky to have a variety of friends in fields that work in a fields that were related to the book: medicine, engineering, politics, military, etc. Okay,
Oh, that's very
so
cool.
yeah, he did a lot of research and a lot of interviews.
Excellent. Oh, that's good to
I
know.
had to go to the actual source because I'm an academic and I can't just read Wikipedia and be like, yeah, seems legit.
Oh, yeah, no. I mean, you can trust that to an extent, but always verify your sources, people.
Right. Yes.
Cross reference everything.
Otherwise, you're gonna end up like people in World War Z.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
um, but yeah, it's a really, I think, comprehensive
Hmm.
book more than anything else.
There was a particular stance he took, not necessarily a stance, that I found interesting. And it was talking about coming out on the other side of things, and they were starting to like figure out how to like kill them and create the safe zones and whatnot. And the president had come up with like these kind of archaic ideas of punishments to change how they
Yeah.
handled looters and things. Because like there's no jail, and I was like, I feel like that's such an interesting take on that. And so assuming that like in such a huge global crisis like that, that we would still be so obsessed with punishing criminals instead of like rehabilitating society and like thinking, well, if they're looting, they need stuff. Like why can't we take it more as like a better distribution of supplies and taking better care of our communities kind of thing?
I think it was meant to be both. I think that's why it's like, because I mean, like, because they talk about, like, for that, the practical implications of course, you can't really punish people. Like, you
Mhm.
can't put them in jail because who can give resources to that?
Right.
Um, but I mean, because it's hard because the book doesn't necessarily go into these people who are just doing things for selfish reasons, who people who are doing things for actually, like, you know what I mean?
Right. Like we
For
don't he
for
doesn't
reasons that make sense.
yeah, he doesn't examine it closely enough to really know if they're just like looting to be a dick or if they're like, I don't have food.
Yeah, I don't think that was the point of the section. I think the point of the
Mhm.
section was to just because it's in the section that's talking about how practical of a man he is and how
Mhm.
he really like that was kind of his focus was just it did not make sense to put people in jail.
Mhm.
So you have to come up with some other way of deterring them.
Right.
And I do think his public humiliation thing is like spot on.
Yeah, I feel like it's realistic. Like I could see it happening. It's just I think it's sad that like even in a perceived crisis like that, we would still be so obsessed with making sure like people who are bad are getting punished and there's law and order instead of just being like, let's try to all rehabilitate together kind of thing.
I mean, you could argue that that is them attempting to rehabilitate because if you're not
I guess that's true. If it's just the extent of public humiliation.
yeah,
Yeah.
especially because it's more one and done it seems like than
Mhm. Yeah.
ongoing. It's not like you're continuously getting punished. It's like a one and done of like, okay, don't do that again.
Yep.
Go back.
That makes sense.
So, but I also I see your point.
Yeah.
So,
I think it's there's like not enough meat there to like really figure out what his intention was. I just thought it was like something
yeah.
interesting to note.
Yeah. Um
I can like see the wheels turning in your brain.
I know. I have to like explain that at like different places sometimes because like they don't because I was having a conversation with some people that like you don't seem like you're happy about what you're hearing or whatever. It's like nope, my wheels are just going.
You're
Like
just
it's just
processing.
I'm processing. Um But yeah, so it's they do it is, like, meant to be, like, snapshot, so they don't
Mhm.
go heavy duty into a lot of things. It's really meant to be, like, just a global picture of what happens, and so I think that there's different moments in there all over the place that are
Mhm.
don't have enough content to them to really fully examine, but it's, like because it's not interested in, like, the minute as much as it is interested in, like, the humanity and the global reaction,
Right.
I think.
Yeah.
I think.
I think that makes sense. Like you said, is a global reaction, so there's like only so much room to explore things before it gets too America centric. I mean,
Right.
there were a lot of passages from Americans, so but
There were. Um, one of my and I think it's because I think he's really criticizing America.
oh, for sure.
Like, it's definitely like, there's definitely some, like, pro-America stuff in there, but at the same time, I feel like he's really criticizing kind of governments and, isolationism and, like, all of that
I think
kind
he's
of
gone on record confirming that he's like, hell yeah, I'm criticizing America in this book.
yeah, yeah. Which, I mean, absolutely makes sense.
Yeah.
Because, like, one of my favorite sections, and then also I feel like one of the most damning is, like, when the woman whose family, migrated to Canada to get in the cold, basically, for
Hmm.
winter, because that's the whole thing in the book is that everyone's trying to get to the cold so that the zombies will freeze.
Yep.
Um, and she's, like, kicking things like, "These are the things people brought with them, laptops, sleeping bag that didn't work," like, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
Um, and she's just look at this mess of things that, like, people were not informed about. Like, and I remember because she talks about, like, yes, the Hello Kitty sleeping bag isn't gonna do much, but you know, um, like, camping stores were always the first ones that were empty,
Yeah.
but she also points out that, like, people were getting in sleeping bags with their boots on because they were cold, not realizing it was cutting off their circulation, or, like, drinking to get warm when really it wasn't gonna work, and she's like, the biggest problem was, like, this lack of education, this lack of hard facts, this lack of trying to educate people so they survive, which is a
Right.
very American thing, I feel like.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think I was it an article that he was interviewed about? Just read it earlier, but I can't quite remember. I think where he was talking with someone about like even today we have like a crisis with the way media can like disseminate news to all of its people. Like there's like this huge disconnect for some reason between us learning things that are factual, I guess, and like accepting that they're factual. Like for some reason there's just like this barrier that's like it can't get through. And there was this mention of how it like even goes down all the way to the level of our education system and how like we're not teaching them enough stuff science wise or this and that, and then something like a freaking pandemic happens and we expect people to understand concepts that are like above their pay grade essentially, but they didn't have
Right,
like the background to
right.
grasp what the facts were.
Even things like, yes, the vaccine came around really quickly, but that's because it had so much funding. It had endless funding, and,
Aggressive funding.
they could just singularly work on this.
Yeah.
Like, even, like, I feel like concepts like that have are were not there's a lack I think there's a lack of the appreciation of education in this country.
Yeah.
Um, so it's a lack of believing experts when they tell you, like, "I've studied this for decades, I've studied this for forever, like,
Hmm.
this is what the facts are," and people not respecting that education and believing them.
Right.
I feel like that's the fundamental problem
Right.
in our country when
Um,
it comes to, like, facts, and also the media sensationalizes, like, everything.
oh, everything.
Everything.
Like freaking the Tide Pod thing wasn't even a thing until the media reported on it. Like I think like a handful of people had done it, and they're like, "It's craze sweeping teenagers," and they were like, "Hell yeah, it is now."
Yeah, no.
It's so
So,
stupid.
I feel like there's different bunch of different angles that are
Hmm.
it's great. This book is really depressing, guys.
It's so depressing. I mean, it has this beautiful, hopeful note at the end. Like it's
Mhm.
in its essence, it's a happy story because, like, in a way, humanity won. It survived. It's not like an I Am Legend scenario where there's like maybe 1,000 people left or something like that.
And the vampires slash zombies are like definitively taking over and becoming the new
Hmm.
alpha on Earth.
Oh yeah.
Like, and it's very clear in the book that like you still got a ways to go, you still have zombies to kill, you still got to clear people out. They're still doing a lot of work, but like you for the they technically won the war.
Yeah.
So, and it's just I think that you're right. I think that it's an ultimately hopeful book,
Hmm.
and ultimately I think it shows the super dark side of humanity, but it also is, I feel like, very interested in what the good that humanity is capable of.
Yeah. Absolutely. Can you hear Brendan talking?
No.
Oh, good. You just got really loud all of a sudden. Oh. What the heck was I gonna say?
I don't
Oh,
know.
there was a comment in when I was like reading the synopsis to make sure I had like everything cemented in my head about part of the reason America had such a hard time informing the public about what was probably happening was the desire to not cause panic during an election year. And I was like, stop being relevant to right now. It's too much for me.
Yep.
Yep,
It's the politics episode
pretty
of
much.
Pixel Perfect Podcast,
Yeah,
everyone.
absolutely. If you've made it this far and you still didn't understand which way we leaned, I don't, bless your soul. I don't know how you did that,
Or
but
if you're new, welcome here.
yeah,
We're not
yeah, we're not quiet about it.
no. What was your favorite scene? Or like the scene that fascinated you the most?
um, hmm, that's a very good question. I feel like the opening, like the doctor in China, that just gripped me. Like seeing, I feel like a lot of zombie media doesn't often show like patient zero or like the beginning of the outbreak kind of thing. So I thought
Yeah.
that was really interesting to like have him talking to someone who literally like was there discovering it.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, like, they already knew what was happening because the government, like, already, like, when he calls his friend up and his friend's like, um, hold on, and they're there in an hour and, like, they're already, like, locking everything down.
Hmm.
But, like, definitely, like, that kinda, like, humble beginnings of, like, none of the civilians know what's going on.
Yeah. And how
And, like,
small it started out and how like it
yeah.
makes you feel like, wow, if this could have been not a non-issue or something.
It's also I think that this book is really good on, like, the little details, and it feels
Hmm.
really human. Like, with the guy warning the doctor by being like, "Everything's gonna be alright,"
Oh
and then
my
he's like,
god,
"Well, fuck,
yeah.
everything's fucked. I gotta call my
That was
daughter."
crazy.
Um,
I also really
and
liked that he came up with the idea of it spreading because of illegal organ transfers on the black market. I thought that was really clever.
God,
I
who
was
would
like,
have thought of that?
that's crazy cool. It makes a lot of sense.
Yes. Like, it's one of those things like I was mentioning earlier where, like, you don't think of it, but, like, of
Mhm.
course. Of
Mhm.
course it would spread via organs.
Yeah, for
Like,
sure.
oh my god. It's just like, that's what I mean, it's just, like, one of the most clever books
Yeah.
I think I've ever read, and I just find it really satisfying in a, like, a weird way,
I
'cause I just feel like he's checking off all these boxes that I didn't know existed, and you're just like, "Yes.
yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. He organizes it really well too. Like the whole last chapter is so satisfying. Goodbyes when he's like wrapping up with all
Yeah.
like the big key people. I'm like, this was a beautiful ending. This is great.
Yeah, it really is an ultimately hopeful ending, and I think that he does the way he weaves in the stories, like, how he talks about, um like, I think one of my favorite examples of this is when the smuggler guy smuggling people out of the country talks about how the last thing thing he smuggled was people heading for Kazakhstan,
Mhm.
and then immediately jumps to people in Kazakhstan discovering the virus, like an outbreak of like zombies like
Oops.
attacking. Yeah, and it's just he's very clever with how he organizes it.
Mhm.
It's very purposeful how he organizes it. You can tell a lot of thought went into how am I going to order these stories.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of amazing because there's so many tiny details, but he weaves them all together very cohesively. I'm like, that's a lot of shit to keep track of and make sure you don't like leave a storyline just floating off in
Yeah.
nothing.
It's very realistic, except like exactly like he says, like it's very realistic except for the zombies. Like if you take out the zombies and
Right.
replace it with like any sort of plague or anything, like it's
Absolutely.
very realistic.
Yeah.
So I think he's given a lot of thought into what would really happen if zombies are taking over the earth.
Yep. For sure.
So
Felt real bad for Russia. I was like, that absolutely sounds like something Russia would do, but I hated it. Oh man.
yeah, and then Israel's a big hero in this book too.
Yeah. Yeah.
On some level,
That
like,
was
because
fascinating.
they're part of the big people that puts out the report, they follow all the guidelines, they're, like, the big leaders of, like, "This is happening, we'll house some people," like,
Mhm. And that's not to
they're,
say
like, the
we're
big
taking a stance on anything Israel related. I personally don't know anything about the
I know nothing.
Israel-Palestinian conflict, so I have no opinions.
We are ignorant, but Israel is definitely, like, a big, factor in this book.
Yeah. They just are like, "Oh shit, stuff's bad. Lock it down."
Lock it down. Let's follow the guidelines.
Yep. They're like the Australia/New Zealand of COVID-19.
Yeah, they're definitely, like, the forefront, which is very interesting. Um, and then you have I was trying to think of India's huge. Um, China's obviously huge in this book.
Pakistan and Iran, I think, wipe each other off the map. They just nuke each other. It's done.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's based on like the idea that they didn't have the same hardware set up because everyone thought it was going to be India and Pakistan, so nobody
Mhm.
um like the hardware wasn't set up for them. Like the diplomatic channels weren't set up for them
Yep.
to not blow each other up.
Oops.
So it's a very yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
It's depressing. It's a lot, but I love it.
I feel like this is like, besides not outright being like, I enjoyed it so much, I feel like this is the first thing that we've covered that I had like zero criticisms of.
I mean, yeah. I don't have.
Well, maybe except for
I
Knives
think
Out. I have no criticisms of Knives Out.
that's right. We did Knives Out, didn't we?
We did.
I don't think anybody watched it.
No. We were a little too late to the party with Knives Out.
No, Knives Out is also very, very good.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think the only reason we're able to maintain a conversation about it with no criticisms is just because it's so interesting.
Yeah.
And there's so many different facets to it.
Yeah, it's got a lot going on.
Do you have any more to say? Anything else you want to add?
I do not. I touched on my stuff. I don't like the way I said that.
I touched on my stuff.
Oh man. Should we tell them about our adventure for the rest of the month?
Yeah, so because we're doing zombies for the rest of the month,
Woo.
next week we are doing Zombieland and Zombieland 2 Double Tap. Which I have a lot to say about. So
I haven't seen the second one yet, so I'm actually really excited for this episode.
You're gonna have a lot to say too.
Yay!
And then afterwards we're gonna do Train to Busan, which is a South Korean film that is gonna be a lot of fun. The movie is not a lot of fun, but it's a good movie.
And it's on Netflix, right?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah.
And then we'll do Pride and Prejudice and Zombies because Paige hates me and she wants to do Pride and Prejudice and Zombies.
Well, I mean, the book may not be that bad. I have zero experience with either of the versions, so.
I have read the book.
Oh boy. It's just, if you're on audio and not on YouTube, I wish you could see the face she just made when she said that.
Yeah. And then we think for February we're gonna do cheesy, cushy romance, trash romances.
So much trash.
Because it's February and we fucking can.
Yes, absolutely.
So yeah. But yeah, we're still always open to requests, comments. If there's anything you want us to cover, let us know. And then we will be streaming. We have officially rebranded.
Check out all the fancy stuff.
Yeah, we will be officially streaming starting this week. And we'll be starting off with Hollow Knight. We'll be streaming Hollow Knight.
Yes, should be a lot of fun. But definitely follow on our Twitter or Instagram so you don't miss the going live announcement.
Yes.
Yes.
For sure.
Well, yeah.
Okay.
Well, we'll catch you all next time.
Bye.